Hey guys, welcome back to StorySlices. Today I am joined by the beautiful JB, and in today's story, I caught the most entitled HOA board member you can imagine red-handed stealing water from my property. I'm not part of the HOA, but this HOA-Karen harassed me for years and made my life hell because my property is not part of the HOA.
So, I turned her theft into a lesson she would never forget. Here is what happened. Let's dive right into the HOA story.
And the first one is titled, HOA-Karen Stole My Water for Her Garden, so I set a trap and watched. So about 4 years ago, I bought my house. It is a small cute house on a weirdly shaped piece of land, almost an acre, which around here is basically unheard of. The reason I could afford it is because the previous owner had let it get a little run down and the yard was a mess. I didn't care though. I wanted the space, I wanted a garden, I wanted to not hear my neighbors cough through the walls. But now here is the part that matters. My property is what they call a legacy lot. Basically, the entire neighborhood next to me was developed about 15 years ago into one of those upscale planned communities with a very restrictive, annoying HOA. But my lot was already there. Before any of that, it got grandfathered out of the development, so legally, I'm not part of the HOA. I don't pay their dues, I don't follow their rules. I sort of share a property line with them, but that's it. My deed is clean of any HOA covenants, and I checked twice with a real estate lawyer before I closed because I'd heard horror stories before. The neighbor on the other side of my fence is a woman who I will just call Maria for the sake of the story, and Maria is on the HOA board. Maria has been on the HOA board for, I think, 8 years. She is the worst kind of HOA busybody tyrant you can imagine, and Maria also has a flower garden, and I want to be honest here, the garden was beautiful. She entered it in some regional gardening contest 2 years in a row and won both times. There were ribbons hanging in her sunroom window where everyone could see them. She posted pictures of her garden on the neighborhood Facebook group constantly, like multiple times a week. The garden was her whole personality, and from the moment I moved in, Maria decided I was her enemy. I think it was because I represented something she could not control. She could not find me. She could not issue me violations. She couldn't tell me my fence was the wrong height because legally, on my side, it didn't have to be. She actually came over the first week I moved in with a folder of paperwork and tried to welcome me to the neighborhood community by walking me through the HOA rules. She was standing on my porch in a pink cardigan, holding a binder thicker than the Bible, and she said,
Hi sweetie, I'm Maria. I'm with the board. I just wanted to bring you the welcome package so you can get acquainted with our standards before you start making, decisions.
I said, thanks, but my property is not actually part of the HOA. She blinked at me once, twice, 3 times, like a computer trying to load a web page that did not exist.
I'm sorry, what?
Yeah, it is a legacy lot. It was here before the development. It's not under the covenant. She did this little laugh, a kind of haha that was not really a laugh.
Well, of course, you still want to follow them out of respect. We have a very particular character in this community. People work very hard to maintain it. I'm sure you will want to do your part.
I appreciate that, but no, I'm good.
You are good?
Yes. She looked at the binder and then she looked at me. She looked at the binder again like maybe she could will me into it.
I will just leave this with you anyway.
She said, and she set the binder on my porch, railing it like it was a casserole at a funeral. The harassment started small. She would stand on her side of the fence, make loud comments to whoever was walking by. I would be out planting tomatoes, and I would hear her telling the mail carrier things like,
It's such a shame what they let happen to that lot. Used to be a respectable home before the peasant farm moved in.
She actually said peasant farm. I'm not even making that up. I started calling my vegetable garden the peasant farm in my head, and it became kind of a joke between me and my wife. One afternoon I was on the other side of the bushes, pulling crap grass, and I heard her say to a woman walking a dog,
I told the board, I said, you cannot just let people grow vegetables in the front yard. What's next, livestock?
The woman with the dog mumbled something polite and kept walking. I had to bite my lip to keep from laughing because I was, at that exact moment, kneeling next to a row of zucchini. Then came the calls. The first time the cops showed up at my door, it was a Saturday afternoon, around 2 p.m., and I was mowing the lawn. The officer was apologetic. He said someone reported a noise disturbance. I asked him who. Well, he said he couldn't say, but he raised his eyebrows and tilted his head towards Maria's yard in a way that told me everything. The second time was a code enforcement officer who came to inspect my compost bin because someone had reported it as a vermin hazard. The compost bin was sealed and clean. He left after about 3 minutes. The third time was an HOA violation notice that she taped to my front door for a so-called non-conforming garden ornament, which was a small ceramic gnome my mom had given me. I threw the notice in the recycling bin and put 2 more gnomes out the next day. The morning after I added the new gnomes, I was getting in my car and Maria was at the property line, ostensibly trimming a hedge, but she was trimming the same 6-inch section over and over.
I see. You have made some additions.
Yep, 3 of them. Maria.
You know, in the community, we have a 1 ornament per 10 linear feet of frontage rules.
Lucky me then. She snipped the same leaf 3 times.
It is about cohesion.
No, Maria, it is about gnomes. She made a sound like a tea kettle just barely starting to whistle and went back into her house. Another time she reported me to the IRS. She proudly told me because she is such an upstanding citizen, claiming I was dodging taxes and doing illegal business. Since I'm not doing anything illegal, obviously nothing came out of that. There was also a time where she let her dog poop right on my doorstep, seemingly to try and get a reaction out of me. Well, let me tell you, I really wanted to teach her a lesson, but I knew that sometimes it's better to stay quiet and then hit them where it hurts the most. So for now, I just ignored everything. I figured if I refused to give her any reaction, eventually she would get bored and find a new target. That is normally how it goes with people like that. But Maria did not get bored.
So guys, before we continue with the title story, if you would have been in this situation, what would you have done? Would you have acted earlier? And maybe try not to let it escalate in the first place? Let me know in the comments to have a little bit of discussion. I feel like OP has been very passive so far. In my opinion at least, if you have an issue with a crazy entitled neighbor like this HOA-Karen, you need to take the trash out before it begins to smell. If you know what I mean. In a lot of these stories, the OP is not aggressive enough, and that can lead to a lot of issues. You need to be proactive with these HOAs and Karens in general. But now, let's continue with the story. And let's see what OP is going to do about this conflict.
And yeah, Maria got more obsessed. About 18 months in, I decided to install a couple of rainwater barrels along the side of the house. My water bill in summer was getting absurd because the vegetable garden was huge by that point and my city had pretty steep tier pricing once you went over a certain amount. So I bought 2 big barrels, hooked them up to the gutter downspouts, put a basic spigot at the bottom of each one and called it a day. The barrels sat on the side of the house facing Maria's property. You could see them clearly from her yard. There's no fence on that side because of how the lot is shaped, just a low row of bushes that I'd planted as a privacy screen. The day I installed them, she walked the property line about 6 times, and on the 7th pass, she finally said, loud enough for me to hear,
"Those are eyesores, industrial, unbelievable."
I kept tightening the spigot.
They are going to attract mosquitoes. You know that, right? You are going to give the whole neighborhood West Nile.
I tightened the spigot some more.
You are not even going to respond?
I waved without looking up. I'd had the barrels for about 1.5 years. Before any of this started, they worked great. I mean, free water for the garden saved me probably $150 a summer. Now, here's where it gets stupid though. This past June we had a stretch of weather where it rained for almost 6 days straight. Heavy rain. And yeah, both barrels should have been overflowing. They have an overflow valve on top that diverts excess water back into the gutter line, so I knew for a fact that they should be at maximum capacity. About 3 days after the rain finally stopped, I went out one evening to water my plants and noticed the first barrel was missing quite a bit of water. The second one was about 2/3 full and I thought maybe I had a leak. I checked the seals, checked the spigot, checked the connection to the gutter. But everything was tight. No puddle on the ground, no drip. I shrugged and figured maybe I'd used more than I remembered. I filled my watering cans and went about my evening. The next week, the same thing. We had a couple of overnight thunderstorms. The barrels should have been topped back up, and when I went to use them on Saturday morning, they were once again missing too much water. That is when I started getting suspicious. I'm not really a paranoid guy, I really tried to come up with a normal explanation first. Maybe it was an animal, but the lids were on tight and there's no way a raccoon is operating a spigot. Maybe a slow leak that I was missing. I took the barrels apart partially and inspected everything, and they were fine. Maybe my wife was using more water than usual, but she said no, she had barely used the barrels at all that month. The third time it happened, I got home from work about an hour earlier than usual on a Wednesday. My wife had taken the kids to her mom's place, so the house was empty. I pulled into the driveway, came in through the side door because I'd been carrying groceries, and as I was walking up the driveway, I caught movement out of the corner of my eye. It was Maria and some friends of hers walking back towards her own front yard from the side of my house, carrying those big plastic watering cans. It was the 2-gallon kind. It was full and sloshing. They didn't see me. I had turned the engine off and they were already past the bushes by the time I came around. They just walked across her lawn, set the can down by the flower beds and started watering the dahlias like it was the most normal thing in the world. I stood in my driveway for about 30 seconds just trying to process it. This woman and her friends, who had called the cops on me before for mowing my lawn, who had reported my compost as a vermin hazard, who tried to fine me for a garden gnome, were stealing my rainwater from the side of my own house while I was at work. The harassment had been going on now for over 3 years. Going to the police about a watering can was not gonna fix any of that, it was just gonna give her more ammunition. I wanted her to stop. I wanted her to stop forever. I caught her stealing my water several more times, and at some point I had enough with this entitled behavior and her thinking that she can get away with everything. I had thought about it for a while, and then I remembered something I'd read on a gardening forum about a year before. It was vinegar. If you've ever looked into natural weed control, you know that high concentration acetic acid, basically strong vinegar, is one of the most effective things that you can spray on baby weeds. The agricultural stuff, which is 20 to 30%, will kill almost anything green it touches. People usually use it to clear gravel driveways, brick pathways, that kind of thing. It is sold legally at hardware stores and farm supply places. It is not a controlled substance or something. It's not poison in the traditional sense, it is just really strong vinegar. But here's the part that's relevant. When you pour high concentration acetic acid into soil, it does not just burn the leaves, it crashes the pH of the soil. Most flowers, especially roses and tulips and dahlias, want their soil at a specific pH range, somewhere around 6 to 7 depending on the species, and if you drop the soil pH down to 3 or 4, the plants cannot absorb nutrients anymore, the roots get burnt, the fine root hairs that actually do the work of pulling water and minerals out of the dirt get destroyed. The plant looks like it is dying of drought, even though it just got watered. It looks exactly like a fungus or root rot or some weird mystery disease, and most importantly, vinegar breaks down. After a few days, it's mostly water and carbon dioxide. There's no chemical signature, nothing to trace. I drove out to the agricultural supply store on the edge of town the next morning. I bought 4 1-gallon jugs of 30% agricultural vinegar. Then I stopped at a regular grocery store and bought 8 gallons of cheap distilled white vinegar at 5% because I needed volume for my barrels. The vinegar in those barrels was on my property. I had a legitimate use for it. I do actually kill weeds on my gravel driveway and along the edges of my vegetable beds with vinegar solutions, so the barrels had no label that said drinking water. They were just rain barrels on the side of a private home on my private property. Anyone who took water from them and used it on their plants was, legally speaking, taking a substance they had not been given permission to take and using it for a purpose I had not authorized. I was prepared to make that argument if it ever came up. That afternoon, I poured all the vinegar I had into the 2 barrels, mixing them between the 2, so each one had a heavy concentration. Then I topped them off with a hose so the levels looked exactly like they had the day before. I put the lids back on, I cleaned up, I went inside and made dinner. And I waited. The next morning I left for work at my normal time, and when I came home that evening, I checked the barrels. The levels had dropped about 3 gallons in the first one, just like clockwork. I just refilled the barrel from the hose, added more vinegar and went inside. 2 days later on Saturday morning, I was eating breakfast and I heard Maria's voice from the other side of the bushes. She was on the phone with someone, loud, the way she always was when she wanted the neighborhood to overhear everything.
I don't know what's wrong with them. They were perfect last week. The leaves are just curling up. No, I checked. No, Louise, I'm telling you, I checked. Yes, of course. I deadheaded. Louis, I have 1 ribbons. I think I know how to deadhead a rose.
I almost choked on my coffee, but the next weekend her dahlias were brown around the edges, her other flowers were drooping. The roses, which had been in full bloom before, started dropping petals in clusters. She was out there every day with a different bag of something, soil amendments, fertilizer, fungicide. I would see her kneeling in the dirt for hours, examining leaves, scraping mulch back to look at the roots. She was panicking. For some reason, she kept stealing the water though. Every 2 or 3 days the level dropped. I kept refilling and redosing. The agricultural vinegar was running out, so I drove back and bought a lot more. The Facebook post I'd been waiting for finally happened about 10 days in. My wife's cousin lives in the HOA neighborhood and she's in the community Facebook group, so she sent me a screenshot. Maria had posted a long dramatic message asking if anyone else's gardens were dying. Attaching 3 photos of her crispy dahlias, she was begging for advice. The comments were exactly what you would expect. Someone said it was probably the heat, someone said root rot, someone suggested neem oil, someone said it might be a soil-borne fungus and to flush the beds with water. Well, that last one almost made me laugh out loud because she did try it. She flushed the beds with my water, with more vinegar, and by 2 weeks in her flower garden looked like a wildfire had gone through it. The prized backyard with all the ribbons and the contest entries, that was destroyed. Anyone with eyes could see it was something specific to her watering source, but Maria kept treating it like a disease. She made another Facebook post, this one was even angrier. She accused someone of sabotage and said that she was going to be installing cameras. The comments were less sympathetic this time because, frankly, no one in that neighborhood actually liked her. They had been getting fined and lectured by her for years. A few people privately messaged my wife's cousin asking if she knew anything. She didn't though at the time. I hadn't told my wife yet either. I was waiting for the right moment. On a Tuesday evening, about 3 weeks after I had first dosed the barrels, I was in my kitchen washing dishes when I heard pounding on my front door, like someone trying to break it down. I knew immediately who it was. I opened the door and Maria was standing there with her face the color of one of her dead roses. She had on gardening gloves and dirt on her jeans. Her hair was coming loose from the bun she always wore.
What did you put in your water?
She said. I stood in the doorway and looked at her for a second, just looked at her. I'm sorry? I said.
Your water? Your barrels. You did something to them. My garden is dying.
I leaned on the doorframe. Maria, I said very calmly, what exactly are you accusing me of?
I know. You did something to that water.
How would you know what is in my barrels? She opened her mouth, she closed it, she opened it again.
I can't smell it.
She tried. You can smell what is inside a sealed barrel from your yard?
Yes.
Through a closed lid?
There is a smell.
Maria, what does it smell like?
It smells acidic.
Acidic, huh?
Yeah.
Like vinegar? She froze. Like a deer that had just heard a stick snap, I let the silence sit. I let it really stretch out. I could see her brain working, trying to find a way out of the corner she had just walked into.
I just assume anyone could see them. You are growing something dangerous on your property, and it's affecting my plants.
Affecting your plants? I said. Through the air, huh? Maria, my barrels are sealed. They are full of rainwater that I use on my own garden. And my garden is fine. So how would anything in them be affecting your flowers exactly?
There is runoff from your property onto mine.
Maria, your yard is uphill from my barrels. Water does not run uphill.
Well, the wind then.
So the wind is carrying liquid out of a sealed barrel and depositing it precisely on your dahlias and not on any of my plants 10 feet away, huh? She just stared at me. The wheels were turning so loud I could almost hear them. I decided to give her the gift of the answer. Well, for your information, I said, I do mix vinegar into my rain barrels. I use it as a natural weed killer for my gravel driveway and my pathway edges. It's a totally legal product that I buy at the hardware store. I have rights to put whatever I want into my own water on my own property for my own legitimate uses. So, unless you have an explanation for how something on my property is affecting yours, I think you should go home. Her face went from red to white to then red again. I could tell she was about to say something. I could tell she was about to demand to know how much vinegar, what concentration, when did I start, just all of it. Because if she could prove that I'd put it in there knowing she was taking it, that might give her some kind of moral high ground. But she couldn't ask any of those questions without admitting that she had been on my property and taken my water.
You are a horrible person.
She finally said. Have a nice evening, Maria. I closed the door. I watched her through the side window. She stood on my porch for a full minute and then she walked back across the lawn towards her own house, hunched over like someone had punched her in the stomach. I'm not gonna lie, I felt great. But I was not done yet, because here's the thing. She was gonna spin this, I knew she was. By tomorrow she would be telling everyone in the neighborhood that I had poisoned her water, that I was a danger to the community, and that the HOA needed to do something about me. She had already shown me that she was perfectly happy to weaponize the police and the city against me. The vinegar trap would not be enough on its own. I had to make sure the truth got out before her version did, so that night I sat down at my computer and I wrote a Facebook post. I'm not in the HOA's private group, but the neighborhood has a public page that anyone in the area can post on. It is usually used for lost dogs and yard sales mostly. I joined it about a year ago when I was looking for a free trampoline. I posted about everything that happened. I didn't name her. I didn't have to. Half the neighborhood had already been watching her drag bag after bag of expensive soil amendments into a dying garden for 3 weeks already. Half of them had read her panicked Facebook posts and half of them had walked past her yard and smelled the rotting plants. The post went up at about 9 p.m. and by 10 p.m. it had 30 comments already. By midnight it had 100 and by the next morning it was the only thing anyone in the neighborhood was talking about. I want to be honest here, the comments were brutal. Not towards me, towards her. Years and years of Maria, enforcing rules with a clipboard and a smile, fining people for trash cans left out an extra day, threatening neighbors over bird feeders, filing complaints about kids' chalk drawings on the sidewalk. All of it came pouring out into that comment section. People were not even being subtle anymore. Someone wrote, I wonder whose dahlias have been crispy lately. Someone else wrote, maybe she should stick to growing rules and citations instead of flowers. A guy I'd never met posted, imagine being the kind of person who steals from your neighbor and then poisons yourself doing it. Just imagine. I really had to laugh at this. I mean, I didn't engage with any of it, I just liked the post and went to work. Maria didn't post a response. She couldn't. Anything she said in her own defense would be an admission. The smart play for her was to stay completely silent and hope it just blew over, but silence on Facebook is its own kind of guilty plea, especially when everyone knows whose garden died. The HOA board had a regularly scheduled meeting that Thursday. I'm told by my wife's cousin, who attended, that it was the most uncomfortable meeting in the history of the neighborhood. Maria didn't show up. The board members spent 20 minutes pretending the elephant in the room was not there, before one of them, the treasurer I think, finally said something like, "We're going to need to address the situation with the public Facebook post and the alleged incident on the adjacent property." Maria's seat on the board became an item of discussion. I'm told that one neighbor stood up and said, "If we have a board member who has been credibly accused of trespass and theft against a neighbor and who hasn't denied it, we have a problem here." Well, about a week after the Facebook post, an envelope showed up in my mailbox. This envelope was from the HOA. I opened it expecting some kind of veiled threat against me, but instead it was a polite, formal letter expressing the board's regret over any inconvenience caused by activities of any individual associated with the community. It did not name Maria, it did not admit fault, but it specifically stated that the HOA had been informed of the matter and had taken appropriate internal measures. I'm pretty sure that was as close to a public throwing under the bus as the HOA was capable of without exposing themselves to a defamation suit from her. Sometime after that, my wife's cousin sent me another screenshot. Maria had resigned from the HOA board. The post was 3 sentences long and made no reference to anything that had happened.
Honestly, if you ask me, OP did nothing wrong. OP put vinegar in his own rain barrels on his property for his legitimate use, which is weed control. That is completely legal. Maria have zero right to trespass on this property and steal water. The fact that she was stealing it and then accidentally killed her own plants with something she had no business taking in the first place is 100% on her. The fact that she could not even admit to the neighborhood what she was doing tells you everything. She knew she was wrong. She knew she was stealing. And when she got caught, she tried to play the victim.
And yeah guys, I hope you enjoyed the video. Please don't forget to subscribe to StorySlices and please post some pizza emojis in the comments if you want to show your support. Thank you so much and we will see you again soon.